We'll be starting shortly. This is just a quick sound test. Hello everybody, welcome to this live stream on the Excel Spreadsheet Skunk Works channel. I'm pumped that you're watching this video, and this topic is a topic I'm trying to attack today. And in 10 years of Excel consultancy, teaching, producing YouTube videos, this is the most important topic, but it's taken me this long to work out how to explain it, and I still don't know if I'm going to be able to explain it properly, to be honest with you. That's why today I'm going to have two tries at this today, You can see in the title for this stream, it's actually a pre-stream. That's because the main event is happening later on. The main event is happening on the Tiger Spreadsheet Solutions YouTube channel, 1700 UK time, which is in about 3 hours. So I very much hope you'll join us for that. So this is a bit of a taster as well as being a bit of a rehearsal for me. How well have I got these ideas organized in my head? Hopefully this is going to improve the quality of the stream later. But before I give you a little introduction to the topic, let's just see who's watching the chat. We've got a few people in. Fantastic stuff. You know, I don't promote the streams on this channel because they're rough and ready. So I'm absolutely pumped some people are in. Who's in the chat? Michelle is in the chat. Welcome, Michelle. Fantastic to see you. Make sure you say hello in the chat, and the usual questions. Where are you watching from? What's the weather like? It's a beautiful, breezy autumn day here in the UK. So let's get into the topic. And we're talking about metacognition and meta skills in Excel. So what's the motivation for this video? Well, I said I work with people every day, people who are trying to get better with Excel, people who are trying to implement Excel properly. And what concerns me is that what people think is the important skill, the important stuff, is not actually the important stuff. And sometimes when things are going wrong, sometimes what people think is going wrong is not actually what is going wrong. Now, let me tell you a quick story. And when I was first learning Excel, so this was back in 2008, 2009, when I was doing a master's degree, people were talking about what makes you good at Excel. What makes you good at Excel? And people were throwing around names of formulae in Excel, and I was looking left and right. I had no idea what these people were saying, but there was kind of a consensus emerged in this conversation that if you know VLOOKUP, If you know the VLOOKUP formula, then you're good at Excel. And VLOOKUP really fascinates me. It has this kind of mysterious appeal, and there's no doubt it's a powerful formula. I'm certainly not being patronizing to people who, take pride in having mastered VLOOKUP. But what I'm saying is, it doesn't necessarily mean you're getting the most out of your Excel ability if you can do VLOOKUP, or if you can do offset, or if you can do match, or if you can do VBA, or if you can do pivot tables. Yes, the most important thing in Excel learning is not one of Excel functions, one of Excel's techniques. Yes, it's not even VBA program. The only thing that matters to me, and if you said to me, there's two candidates to work for your company, one of them is a programmer, lots of experience, worked for all these companies, but the other one doesn't have much experience, but we think has excellent metacognitive ability every time, I'm going to go for the one with the metacognitive ability. So it's not all about all the techniques and the skills. It's whether you can do metacognition. I'm going to try explain these ideas with reference to our little Excel file. I'm going to try and link them all together for you. So what do we mean by metacognition? Well, we've got the word meta there, and meta means on a higher level. And the basic idea is we have all our Excel techniques, VLOOKUP being one, pivot tables being another, loops in VBA being another, an endless number of Excel techniques. But our ability to get value out of those techniques, to apply them properly, depends on our metacognitive ability. So I'm going to get straight into it and give you some examples. So our first example of metacognition is, well, what do you think it's going to be? You're probably thinking, what on earth is this all about? Is being able to, in fact, let's say know what to do when things go wrong. Exclamation mark. There we go. So know what to do when things go wrong. Let me know in the chat, when did something last go wrong for you in Excel? And maybe give us an idea what happened. Let me know in the chat, or maybe you can just make a note now. When did something last go wrong in Excel, and how did you respond? How did you respond to it? Now, if you're early in your Excel career, you have a deficit. And you think that deficit is, oh, I don't know the VLOOKUP formula. No, the deficit is you're not working on a metacognitive level. The deficit is you don't have the meta skills yet. When things go wrong, a great quote I like is, intelligence is knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. Yeah? Knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. When you get lost, when things go wrong, do you have a procedure? Do you have a process for working through things? If you do, then you have metacognitive ability. You can only develop that if you're thinking on a higher level. What am I going to do when things go wrong? And that shows that you are being a reflective practitioner. And we'll get on to talking about the reflective practitioner in a bit. So what do you do in Excel when things go wrong? What are some of the options we've got? Let's introduce a text box here, but just have a think, make some notes yourself and let me know in the chat. We used to have a nice text box option here. Let me know in the chat, what do you do when things go wrong in Excel? What's your general approach? Where is the text box option gone in Excel? Anyway, let's just have a shape here. Okay, and let's say, can use Vba Debugging Tools. Okay, let's get started with this one. Just going to do a bit of formatting here. And let's say shape format. You can see what I'm doing here. Let's say shape outline, no outline here. And let's say shape fill. Let's just give it some gray fill, and let's make the text black. Okay, can use Vba Debugging Tools we've got here. So what I'm saying to you is the best way to get better at Excel, if you're thinking about VBA, is not to learn loops, not to learn conditional statements, not to learn any of my videos about a particular technique. It's to make sure you understand how to debug in the Vba Editor. What options have we got for debugging in the Vba Editor? I'm going to have to move this into our screenshot now. Let's just insert a module quickly here. How do we do debugging in the Vba Editor? Well, you should know how to step through code. You'll see in most of my videos, I do some kind of stepping through code. You should know how to add a breakpoint to the code. If you click in the margin here, you can add a breakpoint to the code. Message box, hello. I'm just going to put a breakpoint into the code here. So these are examples of techniques that are kind of on the meta level. Things like practical things, just like having 2 screens. I've got 3 screens here today. Sometimes I have a 4th screen set up as well. Practical things like having 2 screens, understanding how to put the Vba Editor on one screen and Excel on the other screen so you can step through the VBA and see what's happening in Excel. This is another super useful technique that's going to allow you to understand what's going on and give you a procedure so that you know what to do when you don't know what to do. When you're lost in Excel, you can say, oh, it's okay, I know what to do. No doubt programming sessions are stressful, can be stressful, but I have much less stress these days because I'm expecting things to go wrong at some point. And I know when things go wrong, I'm going to be able to handle it. I have a procedure to go through. And what do I do? Well, get the Vba Editor open, get myself a situation where I can see the Vba Editor and Excel at the same time. And then usually I'll step through the code just by going debug, step into, and then hitting the F8 key. So if you can do this, you've got command of the debugging tools in the Vba Editor, your meta skills are good. That is going to accelerate and maybe even unleash your Excel VBA learning. Because if you can deal with problems, you can learn everything quicker. You can learn loops quicker. You can learn conditional statements quicker. You can learn anything in VBA faster if you have this particular meta skill, which is being able to use the debugging tools and having confidence when things go wrong. Let's close the Vba Editor for now. So you can use the Vba debugging tools. What other techniques do people know for when things go wrong in Excel? Let me know, Michelle. I think you're still watching, but what do you do when things go wrong in Excel? Probably, if you're anything like me, you might, there's a bit of ranting and raving and shouting, and then hopefully the computer doesn't go out the window. But once you've done all that, I think you've got to do that. And, benefits of working in a micro-sized companies, you don't always have people around. So you can, get your anger out a little bit. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but do you know what to do? When you settle down, have you got a procedure you can work through? So let's have a look at other debugging stuff to do with Excel. Okay, can you fix formulae? Okay, so suppose we're not in the Vba Editor this time, we're just working on some modeling. Remember, a model in Excel consists of input, process, and output, and formulae underpin that process. They create that process. Michelle says in the chat, yes, I tell and scream at first. Absolutely, I won't put screaming on our little overview here, but yeah, that's certainly part of the process. Sometimes you just got to get it out. Can you fix formulae in Excel? So if immediately you're thinking, well, I wouldn't know what to do if a formula doesn't work, then that shows you've got to work on your meta skills. If you have a procedure for fixing formulae, you'll have more confidence working with formulae. That's going to accelerate your learning. So what options have we got for fixing formulae? Well, a great option up here, we've got tracing precedence, tracing dependence. That's going to allow us to see the different links between the formulae. We've also got evaluate formula just in the top right hand corner of your screenshot. That allows you to step through and see step by step how Excel works through the formula. And then on a kind of simpler level, got very simple, double clicking on a formula and seeing visually which cells that formula is interacting with. So there's some things that would be right front and center in my mind if a formula wasn't working. And then you have, once you get better at this, you have specific ways of dealing with problems with certain formulae. VLOOKUP, we've also mentioned, but I have a specific kind of way of working if there's a problem with VLOOKUP. Is the reference range correct? The table range, is it not big enough so we're missing the column that we're trying to refer to? Is our lookup value in the first column of the range? Things like this. So for specific formulae, you can have on the meta level a kind of checklist for working through and fixing it. So know what to do when things go wrong, and this is our first meta skill. So let me know in the chat. We've got a couple of people in. Yeah, Michelle says, excellent. Yeah. Michelle says, then I do an internet search. You know what? I'm going to put that in, Michelle. That was not in my notes. I hadn't planned to put that one in, but to be honest, I do that all the time. And I was doing that yesterday. What did I look up yesterday? It's not coming to mind now, but I had 2 or 3. I was doing VBA yesterday. I had 2 or 3 internet searches. I think every coding session I do 2 or 3 internet searches. So let's say, okay, can perform internet search is easy enough. And it may sound a bit kind of simplistic to say, you know, oh, how well can you use Google? But if you know how to do a proper Google search that's going to bring up the terms that you're looking for, this is clearly going to help you. So when things go wrong, can you use the debugging tools in VBA? Can you fix the formula? And can you find help on the internet? Thank you, Michelle, for that excellent idea. Andrew Button is checking in. Welcome, Andrew. Andrew, I think you're down under, but I'm sorry if I've got that wrong. I think you might be down under. Anyway, welcome, Andrew. And fans of the channel will know about the Spreadsheet Skunkworks series where we're building a chess computer. We've got a fantastic little team of developers coming together who are going to help with this series. We're not exactly sure how it's going to work yet, but Andrew is one of those fine people who've stood up and said, I want to help. So fantastic to have you here, Andrew. And how's it going? Welcome. Yep, so know what to do when things go wrong. So this is our first kind of category when we're thinking about Excel Metaskills. Now I'm going to consult with my notes. Right, how about this one? What do you think is coming next? Any ideas? Let's say, okay, appreciates pros, cons of different approaches. Well, this one is meta. Undoubtedly. And if you're at the beginning of your Excel career, well, in many ways I'm jealous because I learned so much and I'm still learning every day with Excel, and it really, you know, getting better at Excel really pushed my career forward and all kinds of good stuff. But it probably won't apply yet. No, when you're getting started with something, you know, you're just trying to get through. You're just trying to do it, and that's absolutely fine. And you should take satisfaction. But if you're a little bit further down the line, and if you've succeeded in developing some of this metacognition, you might be realizing that in Excel, there's always more than one way to solve a problem in Excel. And Michelle and Andrew, let me know about this one. Yeah, Andrew's in Australia. What state are you in, Andrew? In Australia. And let's say we want to do some data analysis in Excel, which is a very common task. So many people out there must be trying to do data analysis. So you might have some sales data and you've got it broken down into region or broken down into salesperson. You want to say, okay, how many products has this salesperson sold? How many of this product has this salesperson sold? So you're kind of looking to slice and dice the data in that way. How would you do that? What techniques are there for doing that? I've just mentally listed 3 different ways of doing that. And what I want you to look out for is what I call South Australia. Fantastic, Andrew. Welcome. What I want you to look at is what I call, and this is one idea I think I developed organically in my own head. I want you to look out for smartest guy in the room syndrome. Smartest guy in the room syndrome. So somebody who says, this is how we should do it in Excel. This is definitively the best way to do it. And you can probably see I get quite emotional about this because it really does frustrate me for a number of reasons that we're going to get into. But in truth, there's always more than one way. If you want to do that data analysis, for example, analyze that sales data, the first one that comes to mind is a pivot table. Pivot table, supremely powerful, a little bit difficult to get to know, but we have a video called My First Pivot Table. You can search it now and have a look, aimed at absolute beginners. That's going to help you get your first pivot table set up. It's a little bit difficult to begin with, but supremely powerful. And we know we can move things around in a pivot table very quickly, get that very specific analysis we need. But last year I was working with a customer and we were doing exactly this. We had a data set, and this particular data set had all of the financial transactions of this, this part of the company for a whole year. So I think 10,000 lines of data or something. And I was speaking to the customer saying, listen, I recommend you do this using a pivot table. And the customer said to me, you know, we've had some problems with pivot tables. And there were some specific reasons, but one of the reasons was, you know, pivot tables, you know, they always seem to change shape. You know, they have extra rows at the bottom. You know, we're not liking this. It's not giving us a neat and tidy look. You know, it's not predictable. So we actually don't want to use pivot tables. So in truth, there's pros and cons for each approach. And when you reach a degree of maturity and experience, when you develop this metacognition and these meta skills, you're going to realize whatever the situation is in Excel, there's different ways of doing it. And I know Andrew is an experienced programmer. Let me know what you think about this idea. So, for example, let's put some more concepts in here. So let's just say, let's say understand pros, cons of, let's have a colon here, pros, cons of the main technique. So using formulae and things like pivot table, data analysis techniques such as pivot tables, and then VBA, etc. So how did I deal with the situation last year where the customer says, no, we don't want a pivot table? I used a combination of formulae. So I used data analysis formulae. We have a series called Data Analysis Formulae for Beginners, where we're using formulae like dsum, sumifs, countifs. I used a combination of formulae and VBA to create a dashboard, create a tabulated analysis that looked a bit like a pivot table, but was actually not a pivot table, was actually driven using formulae, using VBA, and avoiding the cons of pivot tables and harnessing some of the advantages of VBA. With VBA, we can get super bespoke, customized analysis. And with formulae, we get that instant calculation. So we don't have to worry about, refreshing pivot tables. So all these techniques have pros and cons. And if you're working at the meta level, you're not going to rock up to a meeting and give us Excel developers a bad name and say, listen, guys, this is really simple. You just do it that way. You're not going to patronize people. You can see how annoyed this gets me. That's because I've been on the other end of this kind of conversation. Before I had technical capability, people used to talk to me and say, yeah, it's really easy. You just do this. There's always more to it than that. And the reflective practitioner, in fact, I did a post about this on Your Daily Tiger this week. I do a 60-second video every day on Facebook and Instagram under the hashtag Your Daily Tiger. A good consultant, a good programmer will always present options to you. Well, you could do it this way. These are the pros and the cons. You could use a pivot table, but you've got to be comfortable manipulating pivot tables. We could do it in VBA, but that means you're going to create a dependency on me as a consultant because you might not be able to update the VBA yourself. You can do it using formulae. That gives you instant calculation. But if there's a lot of data, it might take a few seconds to calculate, and you're going to have formulae hanging around in the file, which presents a risk because they might get deleted or something. This is the kind of interaction I want to see you having with your customer. You might be saying, but Chris, that means that we're showing kind of vulnerability to the customer. You absolutely are. You're saying my approach might not be perfect. My approach has limitations. I found this is super powerful with customers. I've found you seem to get more respect almost when you're open and upfront about the downsides of your approach, and the customer the customer is aware of what the downsides are and is better equipped to deal with them. So let me know in the chat, any ideas here? What's coming next? I've got one more idea here, which is self-awareness. Okay. So self-awareness. Let's say, what are you confident at? And what are your biases? Here we go. Here we go. Okay. And this is also going to feed in just here. Okay, let's get this arrow. By the way, if you're doing a presentation, don't use PowerPoint, just do it like this. This is what I recommend. And I also recommend live building presentations like this. You know, it's not just because I'm disorganized and don't plan anything, which is sometimes true. It's also because people seem to like it being put together live like this. Anyway, let me know in the chat what you make of it. Andrew says yes, and you also get more interaction from your customers. Absolutely fantastic point. So you're bringing your customer in to the design process, getting their emotional and cognitive commitment, which is a quote from this book, which I'll talk about in a second, getting their emotional and cognitive commitment to the project by coming in and saying, these are the options, which one suits you better? So fantastic point there from Andrew. Yeah. So say we've got this problem, you know, customers come to us, we're looking to do this in Excel, then I want you to be self-aware. What are your biases? So we're saying we've got a range of tools that we could use, and we've got to appreciate the pros and cons of different approaches. Then also at the meta level, you've got to appreciate your own biases. And this is something that really resonates with me. And because I learned VBA quite early in my Excel career. When I was on my master's course, 2008, 2009, I had a 10-week module, and we did about 4 weeks on formulae, things like that, and then 6 or 7 weeks on VBA. Now, there's no doubt this was an incredible module taught by somebody called Andrew Martin, Warwick Business School, just retired. Andrew, hello, if you're watching. I think that unlikely, but an absolutely legendary teacher. I was just incredibly fortunate to have been taught by Andrew. But it built a bias into my practice for the first few years of my career, and that bias was relying too much on VBA, because I was so kind of excited by VBA. And you know, if you've done some VBA, if you haven't done any VBA, go to our Excel VBA for beginners. Just put Excel VBA beginner into YouTube, go to the first video, which is one of our videos. There's a whole playlist which will get you started in VBA. It will get you feeling the power of VBA. And I was kind of really feeling the power of VBA, very excited about VBA. So my early interactions with customers, I didn't quite have the right approach. I was very biased towards VBA, and my customers were like, well, what's this VBA thing? You know, and I was explaining and doing a lot of implementation using VBA. No doubt that had some advantages, some really powerful stuff. Also some disadvantages. There's some things that formulae are better at than VBA. For example, if you're building a basic model, input, process, output, something like a budget planner, for example, you're better off using formulae to do that. It gives you the instant calculation, gives you the transparency of having the formulae in the cells. So I had this bias in my thinking. And also this kind of mindset. I thought the project was about me. You know, I wanted to be the smartest guy in the room. I wanted to solve everybody's problems. I wasn't being a very reflective practitioner. Those metacognitive skills really weren't very well developed. These days, hopefully I've got a much more rounded approach. I'm aware that I had, and I think I still have, a bias towards using VBA. So more recently, in my practice, I've been trying to use more formulae. For example, data analysis formulae. We have a video series, data analysis formulae in Excel, that you're going to love. Pivot tables as well. Pivot tables, I couldn't really do a pivot table for the first kind of 3 years of my career. You know, I could do lots of stuff in VBA, but I literally couldn't do one. So I had a real bias there and a real gap in my toolkit as well, but much more confident with pivot tables these days. I'm very happy to use them in my implementation. So you've got to develop this self-awareness. You know, what was your learning journey through Excel? Did you learn formulae first? Did you learn pivot tables first? Did you learn something else first? And how, on the metacognitive level, how is that affecting the recommendations you're making to your customers, be they external, internal customers, paying customers, non-paying customers, whoever you're working with in Excel? How are your biases shaping your recommendations there? So this is something else at the metacognitive level that's going to massively improve your practice. Moving along, another bubble down here, and we're going to talk about understanding. Yeah, let's talk about understanding different applications. Understand different applications. Okay, let me know in the chat what you think. You know, is this resonating with you? Do you see any bias in your practice? You know, what are the strengths and weaknesses in your tool set? What do you want to get better at? Let me know what's happening in the chat. Andrew says, you also have a problem that your customers can be less receptive due to not being able to understand your recommendations. Yep, absolutely. Whenever you're working with a customer, I always say, you would have heard me say on the channel, you know, your technical skills are important and you need some technical skills, but much more important, in my view, or certainly more important, is your communication skills. Okay. If you've only got a few techniques and good communication skills, you can go very far. If you've got lots of technical stuff, but, you know, limited communication skills, or you don't see the need to communicate and justify and discuss your approach with your customer, that is going to be a bit of a career limiter, I think. Yeah. Okay, then understanding different applications of Excel. So I talk about Excel as a process of translation. You know, when you're having your first client meeting, I actually talk about it as a process of translation. That's going to work pretty nicely. Excellent. Translation. Now, what kind of translation? I used to be a translator, but believe it or not, in the first few years of my career, I lived and worked in Japan. And part of my work was translating, working for a small company in Tokyo, translating articles about the technology industry from Japanese to English. I call it a process of translation. So your customer is going to be talking away, but not in using Excel friendly language. They're going to say, you know, we're looking to do this and that and that. Okay. And you're there taking notes and hopefully asking questions, understanding the situation, maybe doing a rich picture to understand the situation. We have a video on rich picturing. You need to do a process of translation. So all of this thing that the customer is saying, what tools do I have to solve that problem? This is the critical skill really. And we've already talked about data analysis. So if your customer has a data set, yeah, it's very likely they're going to want to do data analysis. So you can translate what they've got, translate that requirement into a technique. So you're understanding different applications. So we're going to might need a pivot table to do data analysis, need some data analysis formulae to do the data analysis. We might need a bespoke VBA solution like I did last summer in order to do the data analysis. So what are the main applications? Let's go through quickly. Let's say understand main applications, and I talk about, are you doing data analysis? Which is when you have a data set. If you have some data, you're likely to be doing data analysis. Are you doing modeling? Are you doing modeling? Do you have an input, a process, and an output? We have a video series called Excel Data Tables, which is from earlier this year. And it's a very good example of building a model. And this particular model, it's a company in Australia. And this particular model is a pricing model for it's a garage door company. It's a very simple model, and the garage doors, they have their client requirements. You know, okay, a client wants a garage door 2 meters long, 1 meter high, 1 meter tall. Then we have these panels that are a set size. So what's the best combination of panels to get this job done? So it has input, process, and output. If you're doing data analysis, then you can put your data into a pivot table, and that input, process, output is not as clear there. If you're doing modeling, you have input, process, output. You have some input cells, you have some formulae doing some calculations, and then you have an output, which is the piece of information the customer is likely to be interested in. So your application could be data analysis. Your application could be modeling. Your application could be as simple as data input. Data input. It surprises me how many people want a tool just to help them record data. And again, this is evidence for me that you don't need the strongest technical skills to really make a career in Excel. Lots of people out there asking for tools just to record data. I've been working this morning. I was working on one of these. So it's just making sure they have the right data in the right places. Just sitting down with a customer, talking through their data requirements. Okay, you need to record this data, this data, this data. I have found is incredibly powerful. And then, well, what techniques are we going to be using? We might be using just a worksheet in Excel with the proper validation, cell validation, with the proper data validation controls. We might be using, for example, a user form in order to do some data import. Although I do find people kind of reach for user forms too quickly, when often you can do it perfectly well in a worksheet. With a user form, you're going to have to combine that with VBA and everything else. So yeah, a third possible application that you should be aware of is just doing simple data input. Not a massive technical requirement, but client projects always challenging. Can you really understand their situation? Can you translate their issues into a tool, into an application that's going to create value for them? Is it data analysis? Is it modeling? Is it data input? And in the real world, you'll see these applications mixed up, of course. For example, you might have a model, which could be, I'm doing a project at the moment, creating a pricing model for a company in the commodities industry. Our model is generating data. We then want to record that data and analyze it. So we've got a modeling aspect, and we've got a data analysis aspect. But you've got to understand different applications and then think, maybe within this application, there's more than one component. And then what are the different roles of those components there? So again, at the meta level, this is going to make everything easier for you if you can understand these applications. Finally, anything in the chat? Nothing in the chat. Let me know if you're still with me, and let me know if you're getting any value out of this, and make sure you're asking your questions. Finally, we're going to have just about got enough room here. And finally, we're going to have, let's have a look, understand workbook structure. Understand workbook structure. So if you'd say to me, Chris, what's the number one reason come to you? The number one reason people come to me is because they're trying to do some data analysis. So maybe they've heard about pivot tables, trying to apply a pivot table. Just take some water quickly. They're logging data, recording data, but they're doing it in a way that completely excludes all of Excel's analytical techniques. By that, I mean, if we want to use a pivot table, we have to have good workbook structure. We have to have all of the data in the same place, consistent, clean, hopefully pre-validated, on a single sheet, preferably without any gaps. Yeah. It absolutely amazes me. It's not people's fault. They just haven't had the education, but it amazes me how often people have, there's some data on this sheet, then there's some data on that sheet, and then there's 2 blocks of data on this sheet. And then, the data on that sheet, the columns are in a different order to this sheet. This happens all the time. The data is not well organized. The workbook structure is simply not effective. So we've got to think about the different roles for each sheet. Different roles for each sheet. Let's put a file box here. Can we move everything up? Alt-H FDO. Alt-H FDO on the Windows PC allows us to select objects. So you can see I just clicked on the mouse and just selected all of these shapes there. Can I just move them up? Let's do it again. And can I just move the shapes up, I wonder? Okay. 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 Why can't I move the shapes up? There we go. Just a bit more precise with the mouse work there. Let's move you up here. Lovely. Move you over here. Lovely. Okay. And then let's just have you in here. This arrow in here. And this arrow coming in here. There we go. So understand roles of different worksheets, we're going to say here. Okay, so a data set. Yes, all your data should be on a single sheet. If you want to do any kind of analysis at all, using a pivot table, even using VBA, it's going to be much simpler if you have all your data on a single sheet. Then if we're working with data, there's various other considerations. Is the data validated, for example? Do you have cell validation, things like drop-down menus? Is the data clean and consistent? Do you have spelling mistakes, things like that in your data? But at the high level, we want to understand workbook structure, understand the roles of different sheets. And what are some of the other roles? Well, you might have a data set. We might have an input sheet. We've already mentioned people using Excel to input data. And for example, we might have, let's just say, a back end sheet. Just see that at the bottom of the screen there, a back end sheet. And the back end sheet is usually going to support the programmer with some calculations there, whatever information it might be to support the programming. That sheet is typically hidden. So how is that going to help us? Well, I get so many emails, as I said, people saying, oh, I'm trying to make this formula work. Yeah, it's really difficult. I'm trying to make this code work. It's really difficult. It's difficult because the meta level skills are not there. If the workbook is not organized, things are much, much, much more complicated. If you have all the data on a single sheet, on the other hand, all the data on a single sheet, you're going to have a much easier time doing data analysis. Andrew says, yes. What about output sheets? Absolutely. Yeah. So none of these lists are exhaustive. I'm just giving examples of things here, but they are the main things. I haven't made any massive omissions here, but Andrew said, yeah, certainly for the roles of different sheets. Yes. An output sheet. So a sheet to display things to the client, which could be some kind of dashboard. Yes, this is certainly a possible role of a worksheet. But if you're doing some planning, and maybe planning really is the meta skill. If you're doing some planning at the beginning of the project, you're going to have the right sheets in the right places. That's going to make formula building much easier. That's going to make implementing pivot tables much easier. If you need VBA, you don't always need VBA. If you need VBA, that's going to make the coding much easier. So let me know, guys, in the chat before we wrap this up. Let me know if you got any final formulae. And what we're saying is, if you are doing metacognition, if you're in command of these meta skills, you are becoming what is called a reflective practitioner. I always recommend this book here, which is called, let's go to the whole camera so people can see. This book is called Rational Analysis for a Problematic World Revisited. There it is. And it's by Jonathan Rosenhead and John Minges, or at least edited by them. And the whole idea in this book is that we've got to be reflective about our practice. It's not the whole idea, but it's one of the ideas. And there's lots of other ideas that I don't want to get into now that really inform my work and really are so useful for this kind of presentation. But it helps you become a reflective practitioner. A reflective practitioner is active on the meta level, is actively applying metacognition. So a reflective practitioner knows what to do when things go wrong. And for Excel, that means being able to use the Vba Editor to debug. It means fixing formulae, and it means getting help from the internet if you need it. The reflective practitioner appreciates there isn't a definitive single solution to any organizational problem. There's no panaceas in organizational life. Understands the pros and cons of different approaches, including their own approach. So formulae, pivot tables, VBA all have pros and cons. And then your own bias comes into play as well. We naturally favor particular techniques. The reflective practitioner is able to understand different applications, the main application of Excel. Are we doing data analysis? Are we doing modeling? are we doing data input? And the reflective practitioner is able to understand workbook structure. So at the workbook level, what are the roles of different sheets? And data, if you want to do an analysis, should be on the same sheet, nicely organized into columns. Then we might have input sheets, back-end sheets, or as Andrew has said, output sheets. So if you can get to grips with these meta skills, it's going to transform. It is going to transform your programming career. If you can get a shift in mindset, move away from your obsession with formulae. Move away from your obsession with obscure VBA code. And I'm speaking to somebody who loves VBA. I'm speaking to somebody who's made a living pretty much out of VBA. But if you can move away from that and move towards these meta level skills that are going to make everything easier, I know it is going to accelerate your Excel learning. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I've absolutely loved making this presentation. It's helped kind of crystallize the idea in my mind. Remember, this is just a pre-stream. 5 o'clock on the Tiger Spreadsheet Solutions YouTube channel. We have the main stream coming up. We're going to be covering these topics in a little more depth. I'd love to see me there. If you enjoyed this content, fantastic. I do a daily video on Facebook and Instagram, #YourDailyTiger. #YourDailyTiger. The Tiger Spreadsheet Solutions channel on YouTube, you can head over there and subscribe. We have a weekly, nicely structured video on there. And then on this channel, the Spreadsheet Skunk Works, we have live presentations. Yes, this is all live, rough and ready, but hopefully lots of value for you. Right, thank you so much for watching, guys. I will see you very soon in another stream.